Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy joins us this morning. Good morning to you, good to see you. But can we start on the situation with grooming gangs, if you don't mind? Because this time last week you were here talking to us on Sky News and you dismissed those calls, Lisa, for a national grooming inquiry. You said, let me quote you, we've had so many inquiries into grooming and every single one has found the same things. Since then, the Home Secretary has announced even more inquiries. Are they a waste of time?
Well, what she announced yesterday was a review of the existing evidence, because we know that there are evidence gaps. We need to make sure that we're collecting proper data on things like ethnicity so that we really fully understand the pattern of behaviour and the drivers that are contributing to this horrendous phenomenon that we've seen in many, many towns across the UK. What we're not doing, though, is putting the brave young girls through the ordeal of having to give evidence again. They've already spent 7 years going through a national inquiry which made 20 recommendations, not a single one of which was implemented under the last government. Many of them told me at the time that they didn't feel that they had any faith that things were going to change, and they weren't sure if they could go through it anymore. We are making good on the promise to enact the recommendations from that inquiry and to fill the evidence gaps that currently exist.
Yeah, Professor Alexis Jay carried out that inquiry, and a report came out a couple of years ago. Are you committing then to following all of her recommendations?
There are a majority of them, absolutely yes. There are a few where we're looking at the way in which we implement them. So, for example, one of the things that Professor Jay recommended was that there was a cabinet minister for children that attended cabinet. We have a Secretary of State in Bridget Phillipson who is heavily committed to this issue and doesn't hesitate to raise the welfare and well-being of children at every opportunity. Just a couple of weeks ago, we brought forward the Children's Wellbeing Bill, which dealt with some of the issues that could have prevented the horrendous case that we saw recently of a very young girl being abused and killed by her family. So we are looking at some of the recommendations to make sure that we implement them in spirit, in the right way, and do what Professor Jay wanted to happen. But there are a number of others where we've already committed and we're wasting no time in implementing them, particularly around mandatory reporting, which, as somebody who's worked with children who've been abused for a very long time before I came into Parliament, I can tell you will make a significant difference, because it tilts the balance of power back in favour of the victim. It makes it a duty for frontline professionals to report on suspicions. Often they're reluctant to do so if they don't have hard evidence. This will tilt the balance of power well in favour of the victim, and it is long overdue.
Well, it does make you wonder where the balance of power lies, because this has all come about because Elon Musk was harping on about it on X. Does it matter to you that he seems to suggest on his own platform that this is a step in the right direction?
Not at all. We're not a government that conducts government by social media. We're not interested in.
So you can't deny that his intervention on this has prompted all of this action from the government.
I utterly refute that. We brought forward the Children's Wellbeing Bill a couple of weeks ago. That is legislation that we announced quite significantly in advance of any noise that we saw on social media. We've been very focused on this issue, and it was part of our manifesto. We were very outspoken about it in opposition, and we've continued to be outspoken about it in government and waste no time in acting. We've got measures coming forward in the Criminal Justice Bill this spring. These things can't be magicked up overnight. We've been working on them for a very long time and working alongside victims to make sure that they're empowered. And we will not change that, regardless of the noise that we see on social media.
OK, look, let's change focus to Ukraine. The Prime Minister obviously visiting Kyiv this week and offering his full support for the Ukrainian government. And if some sort of deal happens, as looks likely, certainly after Monday with the inauguration of Donald Trump, that Britain would provide peacekeepers. Others, though, who know what they're talking about, not least Richard Dannett, who used to be head of the armed forces, says we haven't got a big enough army for that kind of thing.
Well, we inherited an army that was at its smallest size for hundreds of years, and consistently in opposition, we raised concerns about that and the misguided approach of the last government, we are working hard to make good on that promise to increase the amount of defence spending and to support our armed forces. But I think most people in the UK will understand that we're living in a very volatile world where we've got an aggressor in our own neighbourhood in Europe, in Vladimir Putin, whose action in Ukraine is both unconscionable and poses a real risk to the rest of Europe. And we have to make sure that we stand with our allies, we stand with the people of Ukraine, and we stand up to Russian aggression. We made that.
I don't think people are disagreeing with that. What they're saying is Britain doesn't have the resources to do what it might want to. And you talk about an aggressor on one side, you've got a strong man coming into the White House on the other who expects us and other NATO members to spend even more on defence. We've not been spending enough, and you're not committing to spending the right amount.
Well, we are committing to do so, but and our commitment to NATO is unshakable. We are leading members of the NATO alliance, and we are committing to increase defence spending. What we're not doing is what the Conservative government did before the election, which is to make commitments with no idea how they were going to fulfil them. That doesn't help the armed forces, and it doesn't help the UK's security interests. But we take national security with the utmost seriousness. There is nothing more important for a government than keeping people in the United Kingdom safe. And that is why we have made these commitments to Ukraine. It's why we continue to do so. It's why the Prime Minister is there and taking this seriously, and why we've had discussions with the incoming Trump administration to make sure that we work with our closest allies across the Five Eyes Alliance and across the European Union to ensure that Ukraine doesn't just win the war, but wins the peace as well.
Yes. Listen, I know you were in Newcastle this morning to offer more financial support for the creative industries. Tell us more about that.
So today what we're announcing is an uplift in support for a number of areas, including the North East, who are powering ahead with investment in film, music, fashion, video games. These are amongst the fastest growing industries in the UK. They're an incredible source of jobs and growth all over the country, not just in London and the South East, but for too long they've had the brakes on. And today we're taking those brakes off and allowing them to motor ahead. Too many of them, those credible small businesses, startups, tell us that they can't scale up because they can't get the investment that we need. So we're committing that the British Business Bank will increase the amount of support that is available to those businesses. And we're also committing more in the way of innovation. They make a significant contribution to the UK economy. They want to innovate, but the proportion of funding that they get from UKRI, the research and development arm of government, pales in comparison to the amount that they contribute to the UK economy. That is changing today, and we are really pleased to be able to welcome investors from all over the world to the incredible town of Gateshead, where they've been at the forefront of the UK's cultural renaissance in order to welcome that investment, create those good jobs and growth, and make sure that we raise living standards in every part of the country.
You say taking the brakes off, but one of the biggest brakes on business right now, they tell us, is the rise in national insurance contributions they have to make. Any business is going to feel the effects of that when it kicks in the spring. Surely that would be the easiest thing to do, is relieve some of that pressure on these start-up gaming businesses or whatever they happen to be.
Well, businesses all across the country rely on public services. They rely on roads and transportation networks. They rely on proper broadband. They rely on all of the things that government has to provide. And for a decade and a half, we've had underinvestment in those things, which has had a major impact on business. We've also had enormous economic instability. The number one message from business to us, both in opposition and in government, has been that economic stability is the number one priority for us to deliver so that they can welcome investment from all over the world. We've wasted no time in doing those things and in supporting business, but we've had to make difficult choices in order to raise the money to be able to fund the things that they rely on. And today we're announcing even more support for our fastest growing industries to enable them to grow. I think what you'll see later today when we meet in Gateshead with investors from all over the world is a real sense of optimism and self-confidence about Britain's future.
Do you play computer games, by the way?
I do, actually. I've got a 9-year-old who is Switch obsessed. I put in a lot of hours on Animal Crossing, I can tell you that much.
OK. Japanese, obviously, Switch, but maybe we'll see some British games on it as a result of this. Thank you very much indeed,
100%.
Lisa Nandy. Appreciate that.
Thank you.